Noah, I know you had some thoughts too. I'm going to share my screen just from our last, I guess it's our January meeting that we did, and put the objective back up and some of the initial thoughts that we got. Can everybody see the screen or the Word document? All right.
Yes.
So, and really the bullets on there kind of came from our previous conversations and some of the feedback that we got from people in some of these surveys that we've done. And so, I guess, Noah, if you want to go over the objective again, just make sure everybody's good with that, and then see if we can get input from the group just in terms of, as we're thinking about the menu of options and recommendations or action items that we want to present forward as a group. Maybe we can have a good discussion about those.
Totally. Yeah, totally. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so this is this is the objective that we came up with and agreed upon in the last meeting of amplify and scale existing effective efforts for maintaining a sustainable and equitable water supply that balances current needs with future needs to provide a continued high quality of life and affordable access for all. We also, I'm wondering, I think we cut it down a little bit in the last meeting too, Chris. I think we
redundancy of the end statement.
Yeah, I think we cut it off after equitable water supply. Just to make it a little bit more succinct. Yeah. Sweet. But, I think I like how succinct it is, because it's such a complicated issue that we kind of need a single guiding star and a really firm and single message to really work off of. But we also realize that water in itself is a pretty extensive issue, and then we have both the northern side and the southern side of Nevada who are we've heard that the southern side is maybe doing a little bit better than we are up here in the north at times. But does anybody have any new thoughts about our objective here?
Have you included what's working well in the southern portion of the state to potentially expand elsewhere? Or why is it working in the south and not so much the north?
Yeah, it's something I think that we sort of talked about last time. Maybe we were thinking of that under the identifying best practices and policies, because I know some people in the group are pretty adamant that Southern Nevada does have some pretty good ones that we could work off of. But
they do, and they've been in place since like the mid 2000s down here. So
sweet.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing is, there's you kind of have to look at who's using what water and where, because rural Nevada, I mean, most of it, depending on which hydrographic basin you're in, that kind of makes, some of the use questions a little bit more, I guess, closer aligned with the objective, and maybe it even extends into just availability. For example, Diamond Valley, agricultural use is depleted that basin, and it's just over appropriated. I mean, you start getting into, the whole water rights issues, with first in line, first in right. You have similar situations, up and down the Humboldt River, and those are just so different from what, Las Vegas is dealing with on the Colorado River, which has a Colorado River Compact, and Reno and Truckee Meadows on the Truckee River Compact, and what's going on with Carson and the Walker rivers. I mean, it's really complex. I mean, you have to kind of have, you know, the availability equation embedded in. So I mean, as far as like the overall statement, yeah, it's pretty short and succinct, but you know, it comes with a lot of asterisks, and it's not, it can't be one size fit all for everybody. I think there needs to be a little bit of context that goes along with that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So on that, is it kind of from what I'm hearing, is it kind of the issue where we don't quite know, you know, in terms of the, I guess even equating where availability meets actual use in Nevada at times, where, and especially the split between the two different parts of the state of where they're getting their water and where that's going. Seems like that's a pretty big lack of data and information that we have, right?
I don't say I wouldn't say there's a lack of knowledge. I think it's just making sense of all of it, because it's going to be different for everyone. I mean, if you're a Truckee River user, you know where your source is, and you might know, you know, that Tumwa's your ultimately is serving you, you know, and then there the people that are on wells. It's going to be a little bit different. If you're in, you know, Fernley or Fallon, you might be getting, you know, water through Derby Dam. You know, if you're, you know, in Carson City, you know, you might be getting water, you know, from different sources, whether that's Carson River or you know, the Marlette system. I think people might not have a full understanding of how each one works, and it becomes especially nebulous in, you know, some of those places, you know, in the rural parts of the state, like you know, Pahrump and you know, Pahrump Valley, and some of those other basins that are, again, over appropriated and overusing. You know, the whole principle of first in line, first and right. You know, it's creating the commons problems, and people might be aware of the issue, but they just don't know how dire it might be. So I think it again, I mean, we have a difficult time explaining it here in Southern Nevada, and you know, we're saying that we're pretty good at conservation, but you know, it goes far beyond that. I mean, people might not understand that we're sharing with Arizona, California, and the upper basin states and Mexico. I don't think people have a full grasp of, you know, what the use situation really is and how it's being used.
Gotcha.
So how can we represent those thoughts in this menu of options here?
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is an issue that we should be tackling within this menu of options, or something that we should be keeping in mind to be really good about being clear about the distinctions between, you know, different parts of the state where they're using water and where it's coming from.
I'd say the latter. That's my personal opinion.
Gotcha. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Because I know up here in Reno, when we were hearing about because I grew up near Lake Mead, and when we were hearing about how low Lake Mead's getting, some people were freaking out about how our water up here is going to be running low, but that's not even really the case. Like we don't quite share that same water up here. So it's definitely an important issue that to keep in mind.
So where'd you put that under the water conservation and efficiency section? What kind of tactic can we create there to help represent that idea?
Well, I think it's just
As I'll
something
make sure we get all ideas down today.
Right. I think it's just something that we have to make the distinction when in the different solutions, who it's actually targeted towards and where that water source actually exists, rather than even a solution or option in itself. If I'm hearing Marco right. But yeah, sweet. I mean, does anyone else have any other specific thoughts on either of these goals that we have up here already, or any more goals that you've been thinking about as we've been thinking about water and conservation in the past couple of weeks?
I mean, I really think we do need to consider water conservation for industrial sources, just because I feel like there's a lot of water conservation requirements for individual users, and some for obviously for the casinos on the strip, etc. But when it comes to industry, we did bring this up. So, I work for an aggregate company, and we have to use water for dust suppression, and we use a ton of water for dust suppression. But things like that, I think, are areas where we could make larger drops in the bucket if we came up with some options that weren't just spray water everywhere and let it evaporate. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that because it is really specific and not something that I, as a resident up here, has any clue about dust suppression. And I don't know where would we start working on a option
I think it
strategy?
just needs to be something that we need to consider. So, like the casinos on the strip, their water features, etc., have to be reused water. It can't be fresh water. But like for our purposes, for dust mitigation, we use well water, which is essentially fresh water. So it's just something to think about and consider. So same thing, like all the golf courses here are watered with reused water. They're not watered with fresh water. Yeah, I feel like industry, you could make more impact in a larger way if you focus some attention on certain areas instead of just helping individuals, do better, if that makes sense.
Totally. I definitely think so, and I think that's one of the nice things about this group, because I'm working on tech, and then on the executive board of the Sierra Club. So I mean, dust suppression is not within my radar whatsoever. So I think even having this kind of expert view from you to bring it up and inform our considerations of these strategies, because we can both of your experience, and then reach out to those maybe who might, or other industries that might use dust suppression.
I mean, anywhere where you're going to have PM generation, so they'll tend to use dust suppression. It's harder because certain parts of the country just have way more moisture inherently than the desert.
Right.
So they don't have to use as much for dust suppression as we do here in Vegas and Arizona. So, you're trying to help with one environmental issue, and you're creating a separate environmental issue. And that happens quite a bit, to be honest, in my line of work, which is frustrating, but it happens.
Lakshmi, I see you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just kind of have more general thought on this, because I don't know specific numbers for Nevada, but I've been reading in the western states, and the Colorado River, and some of the things that Marco brought up earlier. We can't think of water conservation just from like a state standpoint, right? Because it's really, we share the Sierra snowpack to the aquifers. So, and drought is increasing in the western states. So we I kind of feel like we are already doing enough, and so we just need to expand it to northern Nevada is not probably enough to think about. And also, this is an initiative promoted by NDEP. Now is our chance to put all options on the table, be more bold. That's, and like some of the policies around first use, you use it or lose it, those changing those, or being more conservative about water use. I'd like to see that put forth right now. I mean, I think all the points that like Marco and Deb raised, we should put them down here right now.
So what about something of a tactic similar to identifying industries that use large amounts of fresh water and finding alternative methods or source reduction practices? Would that kind of sum up the idea that you guys are discussing right now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. By sector. I mean, agriculture would be one, industrial, and then the different sectors of residential, because, at least in Southern Nevada, and my guess is it's probably very similar in other parts of the state. Residential is the more or less the larger user, or the largest user, both single family and multifamily. But there are certain efficiencies that can be gained depending on how you irrigate, like with agriculture, whether you're using spray or drip, or same thing with multifamily. Multifamily land use is way more efficient for 2 to 5 story buildings than it is with anything larger, because at a certain point you use chillers for air conditioning. Single family, if you're really low density, you're using 3 times as much as multifamily typically does. You'd have to look at it by sector, because you're going to have similar use profiles depending on commercial use types versus industrial use types, so on and so forth.
One other thing, perhaps this fits under policy, but one of the things I noticed is, at least residential, whether you use thousands of gallons of water for your household, or you lower, why not put some kind of a policy where if you go above a certain limit, you pay a higher price for water? It's an idea too.
Yeah, I think we can leave that to the policy group, and I think just identifying here that we need to identify these industries first that are using large amounts of water, and then look at an alternative method. I don't think we need to list every single alternative method, such as the policy you just mentioned, Lakshmi, at this point. I think once we prioritize this objectives, then we can start going into deeper detail. I want to make sure that you guys get as many high-level, objectives or tactics that you need right now throughout all of water conservation. And how does this relate back to sustainability? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I just meant
Okay.
maybe we could start a separate list that we could pass on to the policy team, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that'll definitely come down the road a little bit, Lakshmi. So
Okay.
right now, we really, just want to make sure that this is a strong objective standing alone that can lead to, again, those ideas. I think that's a little bit more in the weeds than we're trying to get to today, but nonetheless, a really good idea. I don't want to diminish from that at all.
Thanks.
So yeah, since I I think since we're seeing a pretty some pretty good focus on this. I mean, this specific idea of using large amounts of fresh water. I was thinking, how we're going to tie this one back into the menu of options. I don't know if we would want to go on to looking at the more high level objectives before, or strategies before going into how we're actually going to tackle this from the menu of options standpoint. But one thing that we're definitely going to have to keep in mind is how we're planning on, for, I guess, looking at the actual strategy of implementation for something like this. So now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking that we could probably talk about it a little bit, maybe in 15 minutes, while we have like 15 minutes left to, kind of assign it as kind of a takeaway where each of us will work on it. But it's just something that we definitely need to keep in mind. But I think, since we're about halfway through, I would want to move on down to the water quality and just make sure that we're taking a look at this as well, since they are kind of two different sections that we identified as pretty separate, but they both seem pretty important. So if there's any more specific thoughts or strategies that anyone has come up with in the meantime, I'd definitely love to hear them about water quality.
Sorry,
Well-
no, can I just one thing before you move to water quality?
Yeah,
Can I-
sure.
I was thinking also some kind of a credit system for people who move from, like in the agriculture, moving to drip irrigation or any kind of a more conservative approaches where they switch. They get some kind of a incentive to switch. Would be an idea that could be put forth.
Totally. I like it.
And I guess is there a bullet that would encapsulate, Marco, the points that you raised at the beginning? You pretty eloquently raised all of the different issues. I mean, I think what you highlighted really is that, there are so many different issues around the state. And I think that there are a lot of people who are, pretty expert in this and dealing with their own local issues. And so I guess in terms of like this group and what we could bring to the table to help push things forward, is it education for the general public? Is it what do you think is the best option in this?
Yeah, I mean, a large part of it is probably, I'd say there's maybe like the four overarching prongs, education being one, and I'm stealing a little bit from SNWA, but education being one, just knowing where and how water is being used. Two is the regulation itself. So having the having the mechanism to internalize the externality, actually getting people to use water appropriately, and having some restrictions in place, whether those are drought oriented or not. The third being incentives, having people voluntarily reduce water maybe to start, but then incentivizing conservation beyond that. And then fourth would be some type of pricing structure itself, having the more you use, the more you pay type of a tiered structure. And those have proven to be pretty effective here. And I know those are, not uncommon in other parts of the country, but, you kind of have to know from the very beginning, where your water is coming from and how much you're using and what way it's being used. And it's going to be different from hydrographic basin to hydrographic basin, and from groundwater users to to municipal users. It's all going to be a little bit different.
One more bullet that we can add to this section as one of the options was brought up last time. I think maybe also by Deb last time was in a similar vein as the as dust suppression, a really specific way that water is being used that we can look at is like cooling needs. Was brought up last time, where water's being used for cooling, but we may look at some other sources that are a bit more environmentally friendly.
Do we have anything about encouraging separate meters for indoors versus outdoors?
We don't. I don't think we do at the moment, but yeah. Do you have any like more specific thoughts on that? Why do you like that idea specifically?
Yeah. So I'm from Florida and moved here recently. So just let me tell you that I don't understand all the water issues out here fully yet. But that was one of the things that we encouraged businesses to do, because then they could really see where their water was coming from, but also here because at least in Southern Nevada, the water that's used outside ultimately gets lost. I mean, we have a small amount of groundwater, but we can't use it for return credits. So the water used indoors isn't quite as important to conserve as it is outdoors. So I'm thinking those separate meters would be helpful from both an educational standpoint, but also for maybe leak detecting and things like that. So you're like, oh, my water bill went up this month, but it only went up outdoors. Then you know that that's why. Gotcha.
Totally. I like that. Also, another thing, coming from my experience, that isn't something that I think about. How the water that goes outside is either evaporating, it's going to the ground, getting pretty lost forever, or at least for a pretty long time, not really recycling back into the system, right? Mm-hmm. Totally, I like it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think our challenge is just, I think this issue popped up for this sustainability working group because, people are concerned about general issues of drought and, general issues of, visions of taking a look at Lake Mead and the water level, and taking a look at, some of the other reservoirs in California. And you see that on the news. And I think that's why it pops up. And I think our challenge here with this group is just trying to figure out, okay, well, that's the challenge that people, would like to address. What could we do as this group, and kind of pushing the Partners for a Sustainable Nevada forward, and what can we bring to the table, in terms of actually, some specifics to addressing some of these issues. Heard some good thoughts. Are there any other thoughts on water conservation and efficiency? And I'll clean up what I have on the screen, but I was just trying to capture some of the initial thoughts as you guys are throwing them out.
Yeah, and then otherwise, if we can also go through each of these now and throw out some pretty rough ideas of implementation, like Chris is talking about. Some like he did through legislative, through who would we actually be talking to in those industries, and start taking a look at that. But you know, if anybody else has any more, totally happy to hear them.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Chris, you know, saying what does this group want to do with water conservation? There's a lot of really, you know, site-specific water conservation groups, you know, that they're doing a lot of great work. How can we emphasize what they're doing? What can you guys do as a group to help support the sustainability initiatives? So I think looking at, instead of trying to see, you know, getting really into those tactics, you know, how can we start centralizing this communication? How can we start getting education out to the public and supporting all of the really other great work that is going on, if that makes sense? I think nonetheless, you guys have a great group of tactics listed here. As Chris said, we can work together kind of clean that up and send that out to you guys to review before we put it into the final draft of the menu of options.
What other ideas do people have in terms of water conservation and efficiency that you'd want to discuss or maybe highlight to the rest of the state using a vehicle like the Partners for Sustainable Nevada?
On a personal level, I've been trying to like research on how to reuse, you know, that we use to maybe, you know, to be able to reuse it externally. I mean, if there is some like company that does this kind of work, and there's some kind of, you know, information that can be shared, that would be kind of great for like a conservation tips around the house, or companies that help you transition to like less water use in the house or in the yard. So maybe it's is there like a, you know, like a clearinghouse where we can go to one place to find all that information? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you live in a rural part of the state, I don't know if you get the same ideas as, you know, what we get for SNWA, or the same thing if you were in, you know, Carson Subconservancy District or in TM and Truckee Meadows. I wouldn't know if you would, or in any other general improvement district. So maybe a clearinghouse would be helpful or useful for, you know, people who are in a district or people who are just off of a well.
Right. I think you're right, Marco, because, you know, Southern Nevada Water Authority has a lot of great education and a lot of great stuff going out. And, you know, in terms of other parts of the state, I guess there's two questions. One, is it the water authority, that the water provider, that's the best delivery mechanism for the education? Or, you know, is there even, I guess, identifying who carries the message, who carries the education, you know, that's part of what our group could maybe help with, giving some ideas. you know, as a group, as we're looking at this and thinking about tackling any of this, are there, again, back to something I'd asked before, are there any, you know, speakers that this group would want to hear from, or are there any particular data sets, data needs that you think are important for us to be able to look at to help us with developing a menu of options and, you know, action items and recommendations?
You know, I would say maybe a general call, Chris, to maybe like TMWA, the, you know, Tumwa, SNWA, Truckee Carson Irrigation District, this Carson Subconservancy District, and then the state engineer. You know, just having all of those, you know, water resources agencies that are involved that can provide maybe a little bit of a overview of what they have and what they don't have. That would be useful.
Also, if there's any data that exists on, you know, water usage over the past 5 years, or, you know, some set of data based on category. So, you know, residential versus industrial versus commercial. If there's any of that data that exists anywhere, that'd be good to look at.
Jennifer, did you have your hand up?
Yes, sorry. I am coming in late to the meeting, so I may be completely out of left field here. I apologize. But just hitting on your last comments, and I might have mentioned this in a previous meeting, but Ann Nolan in the hydrology, I'm trying to remember what the department is up at UNR, has got a new NSF funded project that is called Nevada Water, that is seeking to get stakeholders together to discuss information data needs. And so I don't know how quickly we're trying to put what you've got on the screen here together, but that's a project that will be 1 year, and it starts basically as soon as NSF can get us the money. And so there are just some parallels there in what you're just most recently saying here. So we need to make sure that we're collaborating. I'm on Ann's project, and so I can try to, you know, be the bridge between these two groups. But if someone wants to reach out directly to Ann, we could piggyback on the things that her project is planning on doing to do some of the things that you all just mentioned here recently. So.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I wonder if you could get her availability, Jennifer. We could set up a call either on our next meeting or whenever, you know, she's available, and we can see who can make it.
Absolutely. I think it'd be mutually beneficial to have whatever this group's already thinking about coincide with what she's doing. So yes, I'll make sure and do some email introductions and see if we can do an outside this group meeting that would then result in pulling her into the conversation and her work and ideas.
Totally. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up. I'm kind of wondering. All right, go ahead, Chris.
I guess I was just going to ask a question, and it's probably directed towards you guys at NDEP, Darren and Kayla. You know, in terms of the water quality and water bureau at NDEP, you know, is there already effort that goes on to coordinate these discussions? You know, or is it something that the partnership can help with?
Yeah, so we have two water bureaus in the NDEP, and I don't, as far as my knowledge, Darren, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're talking about water conservation or the sustainability side. They're looking more of the part that's in statute and regulation, looking at water quality testing, But I don't think they're really looking at the sustainability side. So I think that's something that definitely this group can coordinate. And I know someone also mentioned like all of the other water agencies throughout the state. I think that's something that is really going to be the next big hitter.
Okay, thanks. Noah, back to you.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to ask the group if they had, beyond any new ideas, if any of the ones that we've laid out, you have any, specific ideas on, which entities we would want to target, whether even if it is legislative and educational sort of strategy that we would need to take to really push it forward, or if you have another idea on maybe the more specific parts about any one of these ideas, since it's definitely, we're going to have to go a little bit more into depth on both, our thoughts and explanations for the ones that we think are most important here.
When I guess, that one other thought that I had that I just wanted to throw out and see what people think about it, because it's a little bit more in my world, is that, in terms of water resources and availability of water resources going forward, is there a good, one question I have is whether there's a good conversation that goes on between state economic development efforts and water conservation and water availability, water supply type issues. So sometimes those could be, I think, competing concerns. And I guess the question is, is there a conversation that goes on an ongoing basis between those two efforts?
Yes, because you can't conserve what you don't have.
When you say yes, you mean we need to have that conversation?
Yes.
Thanks, Marco.
I know I sat in on the governor's listening sessions on water. I don't think that was this past summer, maybe the summer before. And there were developers speaking on that exact issue, that policies were encouraging developers to do one thing when, and that was definitely, the policies were against conservation, not intentionally, it's just they were set up, that structured that way. So I'd love to hear from someone who has some knowledge in that area, because I don't get the impression that people who want to develop land in Nevada and do the right thing during that process are even allowed to, almost, by the policies that are currently enacted, on the books kind of idea. I do know there's a person that's not here that I just got to speak with a couple of weeks ago, who's part of the master planning for Henderson, Nevada, and they're discussing conservation and how to deal with heat island issues and as they relate to water. So she kind of implied that these are conversations that some of these cities planners are having, at least, and so I could also see if she'd be willing to join us at some point for these conversations.
Was that Lisa Corrado?
It was not. It was Nathita Kima. I'll find it and put it in the chat. I'm blanking out exactly on how to pronounce her name. She may work. That name sounds familiar to me, so she may have dropped that name while we were talking.
Yeah, and that's something that we've all kind of been doing, especially in light of the AB 356 and the non-functional turf bill. So there has been a concerted effort with SNWA to kind of put all the municipalities in the same room.
And I guess following up on that, Marco, do you think that the folks who are doing planning at the, city and county levels, that they have the ability to have that conversation going on with the economic development people?
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it really exists. It's talked about, but it's not really formal. And I think more of that should happen. And unfortunately, we don't have a really good functioning, TRPA or Truckee Meadows in Southern Nevada, like Northern Nevada does. But yeah, that would be like the ideal venue for something like that, is to have, all of the like professions kind of in the same room talking about to really hash out how water use and, development, whether that's economic development or just, development in terms of urban growth, how they need to be coordinated a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'll add in for Clark County's all-in planning process for our community plan. We've invited all of those stakeholders to the table, and we've had we actually had like a roundtable discussion with the developers, just to understand their perspectives and really, dive into like, okay, what are their barriers? Because a lot of the developers do want to develop sustainably. They just are finding some challenges there. And so we also have, the economic development, I think it's department for the county that's been involved, but I could be wrong with the way I'm describing it. But anyway, yeah, we're having conversations in as many ways as we can.
Yep. Okay. All right. Any other things that you want to add to the water conservation and efficiency? All right, and then I guess, in terms of the next part, Noah and I had the conversation about, is this something that we try to tackle both issues, water conservation, water supply type issues and conservation and efficiency, as well as water quality, and that's where you're getting to the, sort of protection of the existing water supply and the waste going into it, the chemicals going into it. Do we want to try to tackle both now, or do we want to table water quality for a later time and focus on this effort on supply now?
So Chris, I would say that, there is a correlation between the two, but again, it's all context, and it's all based on context. I mean, depending on your supply, your supply and the quantity of water, and depending on where it's coming from. If it's like municipally treated through a water treatment plant, that's different than it coming out of the ground and being treated well, and having a health district oversee that. I think bottom line is that everything is got to be complying with the safe drinking water standards at the federal level, and where there are water quality issues, is it related to the quantity, or is it related to the source? There's a tie-in, but it's probably a bit much to get to all at once today.
Yeah, and like I've said before, on any of these issues, we have the 5 different objectives that the sustainability working group has chosen to work on right now. I don't think that with any of this, that what we do now is sort of the end game. It's more the start. And so, if there are other issues that are important that we want to tackle later on, there's certainly the opportunity to do that. And, but we also want to kind of bite off what we can chew and get started and have some successes first. So, I would be okay with saying, hey, let's continue. Let's put it in that, that parking rack, the idea of water quality. What do people think about that?
Yeah, I mean, my research focuses on water quality, and yet I completely agree. There's nothing worse than setting really big goals and not meeting them all simply because you bit off too much. So, and it's good, just like Marco said, it's going to come up in conversation anyway. So I mean, there are reasons to change how water moves around the state simply based on the fact that water quality is declining in areas that just need literally more water. And so I think not putting it down on paper doesn't mean we've eliminated the discussion.
And you can note that, Chris, at the end of this water conservation, this is the next topic we want to tackle. So if you want to make note of it, if you want to acknowledge it, but just saying that we will get to that as this group progresses. It's another way to look at that if you would like.
Noah, anything else you wanted to?
Nothing. I mean, nothing specific for me. I've liked how many topics that we've got down here. So I think it'll be kind of up to you and me, Chris, on how both we're gonna tackle fitting these into a format for the menu of options, as well as not and sending out a way for us to have everybody kind of expound upon these topics a little bit, which is something that me and that you and I can do after we have the rest of our meetings. But I've really liked how we've gotten these ideas down and started looking at some of the people that we can bring in for next meeting.
Okay. So I guess in terms of a proposed approach, I don't know how some of the other groups are doing it. Kayla and Bree, maybe you can help us a little bit, but my thought would be to kind of clean up the list that we have here right now and send that out to the group, get your reactions and additional feedback on, and then I think kind of based on that, decide whether we need to meet again or whether we could just sort of wrap up the communications via email and just sort of online versus having another meeting. And then we're helping or aiming towards that ultimate goal of getting the menu of options for this objective together and to NDEP, so that it's all ready for the summit, the PSN summit at the end of the month.
Yes, I know you guys have your 5 objective meetings today and tomorrow. After your last meeting tomorrow, we'll send out the notes from all 5 meetings to everyone so they can have another week just to review, make any other final comments for people who are unable to attend these meetings. And at that point, we'll have the rough final draft for everyone to review before the final publication on the 31st. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I think so. So it just means, in terms of our follow-up when it comes out, if you could take a look at it, and if you have additional input that you want to provide, please provide it over the coming week so that we can get it all incorporated. Everybody good with that? All right. Well, thanks. I speaking on behalf of Noah and myself, really appreciate everybody's input and all the ideas and great thoughts that we were able to put down today, and look forward to working with you as we keep moving forward. All right. Thanks, everybody.
And the next meeting is on the same line. So if you'd like to stick around for the 11 o'clock planning session, feel free. Yeah, no change.
Thanks, everybody.
Sweet. I'm gonna go grab some coffee real quick, but I'll be right back.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, so the next meeting was going to be the next subgroup that we have going, and it's for the sustainability plans and sustainability planning, and you know, how can we help the communities that have already developed sustainability plans kind of move towards action and implementation and not just have plans, and then how can we help other areas that don't have plans at all, you know, if they want to adopt plans. So we'll start that call in just a couple of minutes.